Hi, welcome again. My name is BJ. I also go by West, and I am one of the co-hosts of this salon series. Kent is my co-host, and he'll be speaking in a moment. Um, and I'm just going to do some of the context setting for what this series is about, the salon series. So we call it Sharing the Path. And the topic and format changes from one call to the next, but the culture of this salon series remains the same. So here's the format that we set up to help us weave our collective fabric. So first, we actively listen for resonance when others are sharing. We listen for common threads in the topic presented. So where is what is being shared? Where does that resonate for me? Where is that also present in my life? Listen for overlap and resonance. So that's how we listen. And how we share is humbly from our own direct experience. That's the invitation, to share humbly from our own direct experience of life, allowing ourselves to be known. So leaning into transparency, and the transparency that really benefits a collective learning, learning about ourselves by learning and witnessing one another. And then also the final cultural piece that we ask for is to please honor free will. So to honor the varying perspectives of our fellow participants, by specifically whatever it is that is my opinion, not asking for you to agree with me necessarily, not trying to present as though this is the correct way and now I need to convince, or ask for agreement. So this is my perspective and I share it. And I also am interested in learning from your perspective. So sharing with an open mind, sharing, being willing to have our minds changed by the sharing of one another. So thank you for joining us within that cultural context. Okay, so now we're going to take a moment for just light prayer and meditation. And then I'm going to turn it over to Kent, and he's going to introduce Stephanie. So let's take a moment and find ourselves. Find yourself in this moment. Connect with your heart and what's alive for you right now. And again, I invite you to be open to being touched by those other selves on this call. And also, if you're interested and willing to lean in and share and allow your share to be touched, to touch others. So now that we're in touch with ourselves, let's envision the group gathered here, sitting in circle together. So in your mind's eye, view those of us, maybe a dozen or so gathered here, as though we're in circle, and feel the connection, the interweaving. And now speaking to our guides and our allies and the invisible support that we all receive, please support us during our time together on this call. Support us to stay connected to our own truth. Support us to being open, to learning together, and to practice sharing the path of the open heart. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your guidance. Okay. And now I'll turn it over to Kent. You're still muted.
Okay, there we go. I'm sorry. It was not cooperating. Okay, Stephanie Anderson. She has so much work-life experience, it just makes my head spin. And I'm going to read off some of those things for you. First of all, she has BAs in philosophy and psychology. And she has a Master of Education degree. And she's worked as a consultant and workshop facilitator for organizations and individuals seeking to improve access to their creativity, collaboration, and communication skills. She's been an inpatient therapeutic designer and facilitator as a child psychiatric specialist at a pediatric hospital for 6 years. She's been a leadership conference director and faculty advisor for youth education organizations, and an end-of-life doula. Now, the most fascinating part, though, is she's also been a comedic performer and storyteller and sketch writer, which I would love to see. I'd love to see you do a comedic routine sometime. And, well, most of all, she's our friend, our beloved friend. Stephanie is unique to me in that she's been to every one of the Law of One events I've been to. She's the only one apart from Gary and Trish. So that makes her special to me. She always fills the space with her loving presence. And at the homecoming, she let touch her moonstone, which was special. She said, only special people get to touch her moonstone. She was actually asking me to confirm that it was a moonstone because she wasn't sure. It didn't look like a regular moonstone. And we confirmed that it was with the help of my app. And she found the Law of One material about 45 years ago. And she sometimes works with the LL team with production for events. And she enjoys learning from many spiritual sources. And this talk, she's derived from her study of transcendental psychology. And I'm very excited to learn what that is all about. I missed her talk. She did a talk at the Coming Home event in Philadelphia this fall. And I missed that, and BJ missed it too. So we're both very excited to hear what she has to share with us today. So, welcome, Stephanie. Let's see your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's so lovely to see friends and thanks for being here, for us to hold space and have a conversation about how we might bring light to this sometimes dark world. As West mentioned, there will be a discussion portion that we're going to save some space for at the end. But if anything resonates with you throughout, feel free to use the reactions button on your screen, on the bottom of your screen, to showcase how you're feeling as I'm sharing some pieces of information. I'm not an expert in all of these things. I am a student of all of these things, as many of us are. And so I am just sharing with you some things that I have found to be a consolidation of lots of different viewpoints and things that could be actually helpful for us. And so here we go. I'm going to share my screen. First off, we're so glad that you're here. I'm so glad that you're here. And the content that we'll run through, I'm going to try to pace myself so that you can hear me and understand. And if you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to drop it into the chat or otherwise hang on, because at the end of it, we'll open up the room to anything that's come to you. So the title of my talk today has been somewhat adapted because I realized that what it is that I would like to practice more of is finding the light switch. I'm using my own candle to like grope around this dark room sometimes. And so I'm really interested in practical approaches, which is what we're going to kind of focus on in this second half. So if you've read the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, you might be familiar with this quote. Sometimes I think the greatest achievement of modern culture is its brilliant selling of samsara and its barren distractions. Modern society seems to be, or seems to me, a celebration of all the things that lead away from the truth, make truth hard to live for, and discourage people from even believing that it exists. So for those of you not familiar with the term samsara, in Buddhism, it's referring to this cycle of life and death, rebirth, that is full of suffering and has no beginning and end. Martin Luther King spoke about this idea of modern man and what it looked like. And his quote up here: when we look at modern man, we have to face the fact that modern man suffers from a kind of poverty of the spirit, which stands in glaring contrast with the scientific and technological abundance. We've learned to fly the air as birds. We've learned to swim the seas as fish, yet we haven't learned to walk the earth as brothers and sisters. And that part is what I want to focus on today. But in order to first, find the light switch in a dark room, we need to just face the fact that we are in a dark room. We have our work cut out for us, as it were. So there's an endless opportunity here of not only learning from our own catalysts, but also finding opportunities to shed light on things. If you're like me, I used to do a lot more viewing of news and social media, and if if I've made some decisions about not doing that anymore, because I found myself just wondering, like, all the time, how am I doing? And it felt a lot more like this, just being pinned underneath whatever the sad, sorrowful moment of the time has been or was. And the lovely introduction that Kent gave kind of touches on some of my career experiences, and I have really proudly been excited to walk into spaces that have been difficult. So, for example, in my work in inpatient psychiatry with teenagers, there was a lot of sorrow there. There was a lot of heartache and like difficulty and challenge. And I went in with my own like sadness and feeling pinned already, and used some of these resources here to kind of pull myself out of it. Is there any questions? Okay. So with the problems that face us in the world today, it can feel like we're at the mercy of a series of turbulent storms above us, of which we have no control. There's an election, there is war, there is famine, there is like angry people around us. There are tumultuous family experiences. There is an upbringing that was difficult. And some of us may even consider ourselves lucky or privileged if we can manage to hold on to the rock that we landed on, whether that be our race, our country of origin, our socioeconomic status, etc., even as the waves crash in around us. Even when the tides are low, we can, and we can actually finally catch our breath and take a break from the constant worry. We're actually physically and emotionally and mentally and spiritually bracing ourselves for what's coming next. And that cycle is the suffering that can happen. And meanwhile, while we're doing this, I'll speak more specifically, more locally in the US, from my own personal experiences of noticing that we're being played in opposition to one another, like chess pieces within the very structures that we built. The systems that funnel the power remain invisible, and we can only see the board as we move along. So we don't see what's, all the decisions that are being made. We see our own square. We see the opponents that we've created around us. And why don't we see that? For several reasons. If we consider how our attention is directed by our own innovations, human beings walk around with blinders on, as our focus and our tribal identities are directed by our own culture, our own country, our own communities, whether they be familial or political. Just as an example, our tunnel vision narrows around who we are, where we should be, who we should be, what we know about others, and what we believe is possible. And those, with those blinders on, we continue potentially to make the same mistakes and have the same challenges. So as Albert Einstein mentioned, that we can't use the same level of consciousness to solve this problem, solve any of the problems that we notice that have occurred or are occurring around us. So in order to get a clearer perspective, we must rise above the metaphorical storm clouds. So for me, like I fly a lot because I have family that's all over the country and I have friends that live everywhere. And so I love being in an airplane and having a window seat, because it is like a physical reminder for me about this idea of, once you get just high enough, then the sun's there, no matter what kind of bumpy ride it was out of Chicago, or how windy it was that day, or how much turbulence. If there is often a point in the flight where you're just above the clouds. So that kind of that consciousness shift offers us the only chance to right the wrongs in the world and to create more harmony within it. This spiritual journey might be conducted among other like-minded people, like this group in here in this Zoom room, or on a solo expedition on your own, which has been the case for me long before I found the Law of One or any kind of spiritual group. Some of us experience this journey as an awakening, and this is the aim of self-transcendent wisdom, which was, this slide deck, and these like pieces were kind of weaved together in my master's in education class. I had a wisdom course, and in that we discussed lots of different types of wisdom, and I really narrowed in on transcendental wisdom and was really fascinated about the attempts of researching these areas, this thing that has felt so outside of the realm of like grasp. So I'm going to share with you some of those things that may not be so unfamiliar to anybody in here, but we're going to tease out a few thought patterns that have created the problems that we face and that have created blocks to accessing our own wisdom. I'm going to call the abundance mentality wisdom, and scarcity foolish. So we know that scarcity mindset feeds off of fear, whereas abundance mindset grows with love. And we're motivated to act and make choices based on either of these states. So there's another way of like looking at this. So abundance mindset, which is located on the left of your screen, creates an open cycle, which creates more and more pathways to successful solutions, whereas scarcity mindset tightens around and contracts out of fear and anxiety and a foundational belief in lack. So it's, for me, I imagine that to be a cycle of abundance kind of spiraling out to include more options and more available choices, and scarcity mindset kind of coiling in on itself. This can extend to the idea of separation consciousness versus unity consciousness. As long as we see ourselves as separate, we remain in a lack mindset. In this idea, which in the law of one is described as the service to self path, which could be, you know, the reason that we see greed, degradation, violation, desecration of the planet and each other and all living things. So social structures like capitalism, consumerism, are all built from an idea of separation consciousness. It kind of like requires it as a function. And unity consciousness on the opposite end allows for us to see ourselves in one another. So one person's suffering is our suffering, one other person's pain is ours. And the state of mind in which we truly wish to do no harm and understand how to love thy neighbor as thyself is because we inherently take in other people's feelings, you know, or have appreciation for all as one. This idea kind of like blew my mind, perhaps your own as well, when you first learned of it or tried to consider how would that even work? How do I thought I'm not supposed to take on person's pain. I thought I need to keep myself separate. You know, we're raised in a way in which throughout our lives we're provided these messages. So, but as we all know, we have the power to remove those distortions by shifting into this service to others path, which helps us to rebuild the structures that were previously created for, you know, that we can redesign them for the greater good. So I've worked in a lot of those types of structures in the medical field, in academia, and others. We're all touched by these spaces that have been built with flaws, you know, and using fear as a big motivating tool. So let's talk a little bit now about connecting to our light. So this is a multi-layered approach, comes from transcendental wisdom teachers and teachings, for the coming slides, you may find some that you already practice or some that you might be curious about, but I see them as kind of a tool belt of options, you know, at any given moment with any given catalyst, what would work the best at this time. To integrate all of them at once would be a dream, but we'll see what tool we need for each thing. The first one being the power of one's presence. So as was mentioned in that intro that Ken gave, so I have a background in improvisation. Improv comedy, improv performance has a central idea, which is you need to be present. You need to be in the moment in order to be able to respond in the moment. So that requires that you let go, you surrender a pre-planning, pre-designing, a controlling of your partner's work on stage, because neither of you have a script. So to be fully present and in the moment allows you to, for those of you familiar with it, of improvisation, of this idea of yes and. It's very popular these days. The idea of yes and is I accept the given circumstances. I see what's here. I'm not going to deny it. I'm not going to pretend it doesn't exist. and I'm not going to control it. What I am going to do is rise to the occasion. This is where the and is. And I'm going to bring my best self to it, to problem solve or to meet the moment. And this, this is most helped, by mindfulness and meditation for some of you. And many of you may are far more familiar with this category of solutions or tools. But the Buddhist perspective on meditation is to observe the thoughts but not get attached. So not to just wipe them all out, but just to like let them float by, kind of going back to the clouds, that analogy of just like allowing anything to be there. It's the same thing as when processing catalysts. So, it's been helpful for me to be like, okay, this is showing up here. What can I like, what can I do? Observe of it and let it go and let the lesson stay with me. So not getting attached or contraction, like allowing for contraction to happen around them, to just be with feelings that emerge from the thoughts. This moves us then into equanimity. So this is a balanced reaction to both joy and misery. So it isn't devoid of either of those angles. It's an allowance for a centeredness to happen. And this, can absolutely help protect us from any emotional agitation. So it's just a mental balance. And these, you can see how they're all it's a multi-layered approach, because it's like we're putting multiple gels over a light, to see what color would come up. The next, and probably I have found to be the most important part, which is healing our own wounds. So, as mentioned in this quote, the idea is behind this is, if we don't heal our own wounds, we can easily, and without knowing, even with good intentions, do harm to others around us. So here's an interesting quote here. When you think everything is someone else's fault, you'll suffer a lot. And when you realize that everything springs only from yourself, you'll learn both peace and joy. So here's an image that kind of helps us to talk about this. So we cannot address, it's my belief that we cannot address the wounds of the world effectively if we haven't healed or begun to start healing or recognizing our own. So when we hide from our own healing, we risk doing unintentional harm to others because we don't actually hear them. We can't actually see them. And we aren't even speaking our own authentic truth. We may be parroting things that have been told to us. And we can see the harm done when those people and institutions among us with limited vision wield their own wounds upon others, even inside of systems that's kind of what's the goal. That's the goal of it. So this then leads us to kind of shield up, and we have our armor on, we've got our sword in our hand, and our hands are so full that we can't even mobilize real world changes. We just see that the harm is done when, those people or institutions among us with limited vision wield their wounds upon others. So here we are just, we end up clashing with others around us, or in the larger sense, around the world. And we cannot see clearly, and we are not with open hands, open arms, actually, doing any solving of this. I see a question in the chat. Oh, beautiful. Thank you, Wes. So, yeah, so then this makes me, this night image reminds me back of this, right? So this game continues to be played by the powers that be, or the institutions that have been created, and separation consciousness. And when we draw clear lines around us as the heroes and the others as the villains, so what square are you on, for example? I'm just using an example of a recent election because it's a great recent catalyst for everybody, no matter where you are on that spectrum. But when we define that black and white thinking, we remain trapped in the game only at the board level. However, when we can zoom out, we're able to see the whole board, the systemic and the institutional players, and how we are neither winner or loser. We're pawns in the game. And that is only until we break free. So one way we can do that is through non-duality. So no longer seeking one another as either members on our team or as seeing others as opponents, releasing judgment of self and others. I say this a lot in my classes. So I teach in a college, and in my classes, we use improvisation in applied ways to help students access their communication skills and their own confidence. And when in the first couple of weeks, when I'm introducing a game, for example, and these are, business students primarily, they'll look at me like, what are we even doing? And I will invite them to consider to release themselves of judgment, of the imperative of judgment, to judge the moment, to judge the game, to judge others, to judge themselves, because it's all the same. And instead to just see what is possible if you let go of that defense. So something that Tara Brach has said, maybe many of you have heard from her teachings, but she speaks on bad othering. So she says that bad othering only increases the divide and the polarity into separation. So this non-duality is the third way, which allows us to hold a both and perspective and at the same time see others and ourselves with compassion. So we can learn how to heal the world by healing first ourselves, but where do we start? That honest, compassionate self-inquiry is the place to go. And with the help of practices like we mentioned earlier, meditation, even journaling, self-reflection, having good people around you, like some of my friends on this call who can provide a mirroring reflection for us. And even like including other people like a therapist or a life coach who is on the beam, who can help guide us. It allows us to collect, contemplate, and challenge old beliefs. And that's the old blinders that are just patterned, and it has obscured our vision, and many of which originated as our early subconscious survival techniques. And we know where our scarcity mindset emerges. Once we know that, then we can rewrite those beliefs. And even if we don't know, we can still recognize that doesn't belong in what we are creating for ourselves. So the recognition and releasing of what I'll call old programs can transform our sense of what might feel as contraction around life circumstances, our loss of personal power and our own self-limiting beliefs. And we can transform that into an expansive state. So these are very embodied states. When we notice a contraction, so for some of you, you may relate to this, but I can sometimes through a lot of meditative practices, I have begun to start to feel into decisions that I have to be making, or something that I'm sitting with, or an approach, and I can help allow my body to help tell me when something is a contraction or an expansion. And that for me comes up as a very physical experience. And for anyone on this call, you may have many other tools of being able to feel into what feels open and what is closing off. And then my next question is always, what is the contraction around? So one thing that I've noticed, once I know, I can see or feel that I'm in a contraction, the first thing I want to do is start with gratitude. Like that kind of unhooks a lot of things. So when I can respond with gratitude, it promotes the expansion, rather than resisting it further. It's like the yes and of it. It's like, I see you're here and I appreciate the signal you're providing. And then I can face it with compassionate self-inquiry. Another tool of this is to get into the practice of embracing awe. And we can do this by either like in a grand scale, like watching aurora borealis photos or videos, or like even recognizing, the like little by little. I have a orchid over there who's like it's like a growing, it's on a growth spurt, even if it has no blossoms on it right now, so it's in its dormancy phase, but it is shooting for the sky. So like recognizing awe in even like small moments or small opportunities can really help prime this idea of expansion. Getting into nature is like one of the ways in which it can open up our presence, our awe, our wonder. It can make space for the sacred, this piece that is unfortunately really missing from our day-to-day experience. The sacred, the ritual, the, this part that will keep us humble and also keep us so much out of our heads, and in this judgmental zone. Indigenous wisdom traditions have long held reverence for the sacredness of nature and its lessons. And I invite you to consider, to see where you can get curious about the cooperation among biological systems, which is, only now, if you're watching any documentaries these days, it's like scientists are like, did you know trees? They're not competing. They're actually in cahoots, or like, wolves are so much into dominance, there's an alpha, and then only recently there was some research that came out that was like, maybe we should check that, because it turns out that the only places that people could observe actual wolf behavior was in captivity. So they're much more, when they go out and they're observing them with drones and like tracking their behaviors for longer term, they see that there's much more cooperation. So I think in many ways, getting curious about how Mother Nature works with cooperation and in cooperation, and to cherish in like this respect, also to cherish our own role as a participating member of nature. Another tool is living with gratitude and open-heartedness. So this is spoken a lot from, I first encountered this kind of idea when I was reading Michael Singer and his book. So living with open-heartedness can be embodied action in your chest. So thinking like, I will continue to remain open even when it's hard, even when it's difficult, challenging. Like, what does that look like? It reminds us that, and gratitude really, for me, has been kind of like the key to just being thankful for anything that is, even if it's not my preference. It can remind us not to close up, attack, or defend our ego. And it's through the open-heartedness that allows us access to seeing the other as ourselves. With a clear perspective, as ourselves within the unity of the world, we have the best chance at seeing solutions and making decisions for the common good, and one that prioritizes the dignity, the respect, and protection of all life, human and nature. These creative and wise solutions will not only stop the bleeding, but also support our collective healing. Collectively, I think it's in like valuable for us to continue to remain curious and to continue to question everything, including the madness behind current systemic methods in our world, in which they're, which has led to certain world problems. Behind the systemic institutionalized methods and operation in our society. And for those of us that are working inside of them, looking for opportunity to ride the wave and to change the direction. And in the meantime, as we navigate our own waves, I invite you all to stay brave. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see anyone who would like to share anything. I'm going to look in the chat first. Thank you, Jonathan, for the TM information. And yeah, thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, I have not practiced transcendental meditation, although I do a couple meditation practices that I, I don't have a formal TM practice though. Are you? Do you?
I do practice, and I've been practicing for 3 years now, and it really has made such a profound difference in my life. Um, and I ultimately do want to be a TM teacher because there is a very specific training process that TM teachers go through in order to offer it as a pure and authentic technique so that every student that learns it can trust and know that they're learning like how to do it properly and that it's from the Vedic literature, which is where it comes from. And
Beautiful.
it's been studied. It's been studied. There's already 600 plus peer-reviewed studies that show all the physiological brain coherence um, um, differences that it makes. And I've experienced it. I've witnessed a lot of other people who are also on a journey with practicing. So I think it's just another tool that we can use to achieve all the things that you said. And I just want to say to you, thank you so much for all that information. I finally recognize you, Stephanie, because we met a couple of years ago. I think
Sure.
you've dyed your hair since the last time I saw you, maybe.
Probably.
Yes, so that's why I was like, "Oh, your face is so familiar," but I can't remember. And then as soon as you mentioned the improv, I was like, "Oh, I
Oh,
remember."
so nice to see you. I'm so
Yes,
glad you're here. Thank
yeah,
you for sharing.
absolutely. Thank you so much for this class.
Wes, I see your hand up.
You do? It's up. Um, yeah, I remember Stephanie from that improv moment too. Um, yeah, I just wanted to say I wanted to share my gratitude with you for creating this presentation and sharing it with us. There's so much here. And it feels like I want to watch this video over and over and just pause and contemplate. And I just wanted to offer you the reflection that I feel like you've gathered so many resources and presented them to us in this beautiful package. And one specific phrase that I am going to carry forward from this presentation is that I can be a participating member of nature.
Mm.
Boom. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, Kent.
Yeah, I have my hand up too. One part that I loved was when you were talking about the contraction versus expansion. And I want to tell a story. When I lived in Colorado, I had a wise old friend there that would tell me that whenever she thought of doing something, she would say, "Yeah, I asked about doing that, but I got a yes, but I got a no." Or she would say, "I asked about doing that and I got a yes." And I didn't understand what she meant by that. So I asked her, "What do you mean you get a yes or a no?" And she explained to me that she asks herself if she should do something. And then she feels in her body how that feels. And if she feels a contraction in her body, that's a no. And if she feels an expansion in her body, that's a yes. So that's how she made decisions on whether or not she should do something.
Yeah. Wow. And how did she come upon that knowledge of her own self?
I don't know how she learned it. Maybe some teacher told her, or maybe she figured it out on her own. I don't know. But I've been using that ever since.
Okay. That sounds really cool. That's something I kind of fell into myself.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. I wanted to thank you so much, Ken.
Yeah.
I wanted to just ask the room, if you could show by like a reactions button, if it would be it would be more comfortable for you to share in a discussion if we stopped the video recording. For anyone that feels like that would be preferred, we're happy to do that.
Or BJ can cut it out afterwards. Right.
Yeah, that's also an option if anyone feels drawn to share something that you would like to have edited out. I can do that before it's posted.
I did see at least one thumbs up. So I think maybe this would be a good time to stop the recording so that anybody that would want to come back on screen or like participate in this discussion could feel comfortable to do so. So for anybody that's watching, thanks for tuning in. Don't go anywhere for those of us in this room.
Mm-hmm.
But for the recording's sake, thank you so much for listening in and for the work that you're doing for yourself and for the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Thank
just
you.
want to offer a brief moment of prayer for those of you who will be ending with the recording. Just an invitation to offer a thanks to your guides, and we'll do that on the call too at the end. Okay, stopping the recording.